This presentation is on creating value through diversification. This is where we start talking about the bigger scope of things. Far too often we think about entrepreneurship when it comes to a small business. When we're talking about making your own restaurant, and we're so focused on getting one location or one business up and running that we don't think about the larger scope. The saying, okay, what happens after you have one business that's up and running and you have enough resources to where you want to move on into more? And this is what this is really talking about. We move beyond, okay, how do we make one company successful? Now start talking about some larger level strategies. Think if you are Microsoft or Google or Apple. Do you have the resources to diversify, to go and even buy another company, buy another business? Well, yes, you do. And what are you going to do with that? There are times when companies have billions of dollars in liquid assets that they're not doing anything with in their own company. Either you give that back to your stockholders, or you need to figure out something to do with it. So, when we do that, we have to start asking the question, instead of what business should we start, we have to start asking what businesses should a corporation compete in? So you have the resources now, you're looking at it and saying, all right, the company that I've got, the one that I started or took over, whatever else, is now successful. So what am I going to do next? Well, you should diversify. So what businesses should we compete in? And how can we get those to have a synergistic effect, so we could create some synergy in there to where it's not just I own multiple companies, but those multiple companies working together are stronger than all of them separately. So, in a very simple way of looking at it, we can do that through mergers and acquisitions, strategic alliances, joint ventures, internal development, but one business plus another business should be more than the two of them. We should have some kind of efficiency, some kind of benefit, something should come out of it. If all that you're doing is owning a company next to another company and the two don't benefit each other, that still works, but you're missing out on these huge opportunities to synergize. So, we can do that by, we're going to talk about either diversifying and merging into related businesses, we call these horizontal relationships, or horizontal and vertical, or we can go into completely unrelated businesses. Those are a little bit trickier, but there's some very solid ways to do that, ways to strategize in there. So horizontal relationships, we're talking about things that are related to our current company. Some very obvious names would be like Burger King merging with McDonald's. All right, now that would be awful and might bring about the end of civilization as we know it, but very related, and you could fairly easily see where, okay, if we all had our same supply chain going into these, we could streamline this to where we're not competing with each other. Instead, it's one mega company. There would be some benefits to that. So you can share tangible resources such as production facilities, distribution channels, and they can also go into unrelated businesses. So some things you can look for in related diversification. Economies of scope. Anytime you hear economies of scope, it goes back to the principle that anytime you're doing something in a larger scale, you can generally do it for cheaper. So if I want to go out and buy 100 cars, for example, just I'm staring out in the parking lot and I'm seeing cars, 100 cars. Well, okay, you might get a price break on that. What happens if I want to buy 1,000 cars? Well, at that point, I'm not going to the dealership down the street. I'm going to the actual, Ford. I'm going to Chevy. I'm going to Dodge. Whichever type of car I want, and saying I want 1,000 vehicles. Let's start negotiating. You're going to get them for cheaper than I would get them walking onto the lot, and for cheaper than you would get if you had 100. When you get into things like manufacturing, for example, doing 1,000 units is a lot more expensive per unit than doing 1,000,000 or 1,000,000,000 units. Anything that we do more of gets easier and therefore gets cheaper. Your machinery gets bigger and more efficient. You can access larger suppliers. You can do all kinds of things. So economies of scope is what you're looking for sometimes when you're looking for a related company. You're saying, you know what, if we just band together, we can do a lot better. Okay, that's when we're talking about pooled negotiating power, is when you're saying, you know what, as a bigger company, I can do better at this negotiation than I'm doing currently as a smaller company. Walmart, when people talk about Walmart, that's one of the things they talk about, even though that is not one of their biggest advantages over their competitors, is that they buy in such massive bulk that they can get a good price for it. The other one we have is vertical integration. Now, we're talking about vertical integration here in a second. First, core competencies. This is a conversation we could talk about for at least 15 minutes in and of itself on one of these, and if we were in class, it'd be an hour or 2 hour long conversation. Your core competency is what your company really does better than everybody else. I could ask, what is Honda's core competency? And if you were to say, oh, they make good cars, you're wrong. If you say they make good lawnmowers, you'd be wrong. Good motorcycles, wrong again. Because those things are not their core competency. Their core competency is their engine. Burger King and have thousands of employees.